All right, welcome back. I'm Dan Neimer. I'm here today with a special guest. This is Moran, who's our area scout in the Northeast for the St. Louis Cardinals. Sean and I kind of go way back, and I feel fortunate that I convinced him to sit and talk to me about some of the different things that it takes to make a player a professional athlete, or before that, make them just a legitimate prospect to be a professional. So we're going to have kind of just a dialogue between one another here about some of the questions that I think our families and players could or should have on the whole professional process. So the first question I have for Shawnee is, could you talk to our guys just a second about what the 5 tools are that make up a professional baseball player, and then also after that talk about the grading scale that you use in the St. Louis Cardinals or any professional organization use, so that our guys are aware.
5 tools are run, hit for power, throw, and field. Pitchers, it's a little different. They're, more fastball, different breaking pitches and command, so we kind of grade them out a little differently. But, every organization probably has a little bit of a different scale. 20 to 80 is generally the common scale. That's the Major League Scouting Bureau scale. 20 being, I guess, well below average. I don't put too many 20s down. It's hard to get a player if you say he's a 20 in any category. So 50 being Major League average. So we're grading those tools on compared to a Major League player. So 50 would be Major League average. 40 is below average. 45 would be fringe average. So you're a little closer to average, but not quite average. 60 is a plus tool, and then 70, that's a rare tool. It's rare to say a guy has a 70 tool, and even more rare to see an 80 tool. A lot of times the 80 tools that you'll hear about are things you can quantify, run times, velos, things like that. It's a lot more rare to hear a guy, talk about a guy having 80 power or being, an 80 defender. That's more of a judgment thing, and guys tend to not go out on a limb with that 80. I really haven't given many. In terms of 80s, I've given a few 80 run times, I'm sure. I don't think I've ever said a guy had an 80 tool other than that. Plus, that 60 tool is really kind of a comfortable range. I could probably count on one hand the number of 70 grades I've given out in, 7, 8 years of scouting.
So in those 7 or 8 years,
actually, this is my 7th year.
in the seven years of professional scouting, and obviously before that coaching college baseball at the highest level, who's the best player that you've seen, and can you talk about their tools?
It's easy. That's Mike Trout. Mike was an 80 runner. I actually had in my report that he had 60, future 60 power. So he's kind of living up to that, and maybe even a little bit better. Across the board that year, his senior year in high school, he was pretty consistent, like plus tools in 4 categories. The only place where he didn't really have a plus tool that year was his arm, but a lot of that was because he was pitching. So it was hard to, when you watched him in infield, outfield, he had, pitched the day before. But that's a guy with, 60 tools across the board, and, a couple that are even better than that.
So you take a guy that has an 80-60 time. What does that translate, or 80 run? What's that translate to in a 60 in some cases?
Well, a 60 is tough because, guys can train for a 60. The more I watch guys run 60s, the stronger guys usually run better 60 times, because that's a far distance. I remember the first time I ran a 60, I was like, man, is this ever going to end, But we do it more by home to first times. So like Trout was like a 3.9, 5, 4.0 down the line, which is an 80 run time from the right side. So 60 time, I don't know what he'd run in the 60, but you can, anything better than 6.7 is good,
So one of the other questions I find myself trying to, and some of the things we try to promote to our players, some of the intangible things. What are some of the things that the Cardinals are looking for, that you specifically as, our area guy are looking for in a player that aren't necessarily quantified by a radar gun or a stopwatch?
Well, the first thing you do look at is the tools, because tools play, and you have to have tools to make it to, higher levels. The difference maker, the separator for every guy is going to be makeup. And there are a lot of different things that go into makeup. How hard they play, how much they love the game, how they deal with failure, which is a big thing. I like to watch a guy fail. You don't always get to see guys in a situation where they haven't had the success that they're used to, but when you do, and you get to watch whether they bounce back or not, that's going to tell you a lot about a player. It's a game of failure, and it's a hard game, and it only gets harder as you move up levels. So dealing with that failure and doing it constructively and getting better, because of the failure, and coming back and having a better at-bat in your fourth at-bat of the day when you're 0 for 3, or when you're struggling on the mound and kind of making a big pitch. Those things tell you more about a player than any conversation you could have with them.
What are some of the no-nos? Like, you go and watch some guys that kind of fringe prospects, and I'm sure you see more of those than you see the guys with the true tool guys. What are some of the no-nos that you could help the players in our Team All-American program try to avoid?
The better the player, the more leeway you get a lot of times. I mean, that's just the truth. But the guys that are kind of on the fringes, if they don't run out ground balls, that's something you don't like to see. You like to see guys run on and off the field. You like to see them, interact well with their teammates. You don't want that guy that's sitting on the end of the bench and nobody talks to, because you can kind of figure out that they probably don't like him very much. Those things. You want a guy that's a good teammate, for sure. And you want a guy that plays hard. You want a guy that loves it.
How do you know if a guy's playing hard?
They can fool you. I have actually gone to games where they didn't know I was there. It's harder now as a scout, and especially a kid that's in his draft year, he kind of knows that there's going to be someone there all the time. But when I was coaching in college, I used to just go and stand way down the line and see what they did when they didn't know anybody was watching. And that's the real true measure of a player, is what they do when no one's watching.
Now, obviously, every kid aspires to be a Major League Baseball player, aspires to be drafted. For the kids in our program, and I think we've got a couple that are guys that could be guys, how will they know, or how will a player know if he's going to be a drafted player? And obviously, when the draft, there's no science to it, but how will that kid know? Is there things that pro scouts do that will kind of tee that up?
I tell guys, we meet with guys in the wintertime, and mostly the higher prospects, and if they're meeting with a lot of teams, they probably have a pretty good chance of getting drafted. The interest level, questionnaires that they have to fill out, those kind of things. But it's hard to really describe it. You just kind of know. When you start seeing 4 or 5 guys show up at your games, sometimes you start to get a feeling that maybe this might happen. The interest level will increase as the spring goes along. Early in the year, you might not have anybody there because it's going to be cold, or it's not that many scouts live in this area, so we might be in another part of the area at that time. But as the spring heats up, you start to see more scouts. It'll seem just kind of become more clear to you. It's really hard to. It makes sense to us, and the players, after they go through it, they're like, oh, okay, yeah, I get it. But it's really hard to describe how it's going to work out, but you're going to know.
So you and I obviously have a long history, but seeing you down at East Cobb and having a chance to watch the players in our program down there compete against some of the southern players and southern teams and programs, what are some of the things that, quote-unquote northern or cold weather state player, what do they need to be focusing on? And do you see a difference between the southern player's skill set and the northern player's skill set in general?
Well, they certainly play more. But tools are tools, like I said in the beginning, and you're going to have. There are certain tools that you're born with, and athleticism is really what we're looking for. So athletes are born everywhere. I mean, there are athletes in Alaska. It doesn't matter where they come from as long as they have the tools to play. I think the the gap has been closed a little bit. You know, indoor facilities in the Northeast have really, you know, exposed guys to baseball for longer periods of time. There's better instruction up here now. You know, the fact that there are tournaments like East Cobb and things like that where, you know, you're playing against better players, and that's how you get better, by playing against good players. And I really think that you know, the northern guys have sort of really closed the gap. It's not as different as it used to be. There used to be, you know, one or two standout guys, and that was kind of it. But you know, even the next level down player now is a little bit more polished, and you know, they just play more baseball.
One of the questions that, you know, we talk about it as a program, you know, kind of that fraternity of baseball guys. Sometimes guys are asking me, you know, hey, what would some of the things that we force our players to do, for example, being high and tight and clean shaven and shirts tucked in and no sandals to the field, are those things that matter to pro scouts, those small details, or are they things that aren't as important to, you know, kind of the old school scouts?
Well, I think the old school guys, it's certainly important to them. You know, for me, I really look at more the way a guy plays the game. You know, I was kind of brought up in that, you know, clean shaven, and you know, your uniform should always be clean and all those things, and it's good. It speaks to the attention to detail, which, you know, I've probably, you know, cared more a little bit about as a college coach. See, it's different for a pro scout. I'm not going to be around these guys every day, and that's not to say that I want to go and draft a guy who's, you know, not a great kid. I try to do that, but when you're coaching in college, you know, I always used to tell people I want to recruit guys that I want to be around every day. So it was really important for me to find guys that kind of fit with the program, you know, no matter where I was. But you know, pro scouting, it's, you know, tools first, makeup second, and those little things, you know, they do add up. I mean, when you go to meet with a guy in the wintertime, and, you know, he's, you know, how he talks to his parents and how he interacts with his parents and how he talks to you and handles himself, and you know, that all goes into it. I'll tell you one thing that I do pay attention to that the old-time scouts always do is, you know, a guy's handshake. You know, does he look you in the eye? Does he have a good handshake? And, you know, there are, you know, countless kind of old-time scouting kind of myths or whatever you might have, but they make sense, and it's for a reason. And I think for me that speaks to your level of confidence. And this is a confidence game. So if you're not a confident guy, if you can't look me in the eye when, you know, we're talking, or, you know, you can't handle yourself in a conversation, I wonder how you're going to handle yourself in a professional clubhouse.
That's a good point. Winding down here, I have, you know, kind of what I call my around the horn thing. Just quick answers, quick questions. Offensively, speed or power?
Power. There's not enough of it in the game right now. It's probably the hardest thing to find. If you find power, you found something. It's you know, there are guys that can run, but man, I mean, National League only had 2 guys over 30 home runs this year, I think. So yeah, power.
Catchers, offensive or defensive?
Defense first. Yeah, come on, I work for the Cardinals, man.
All right, pitching, velo or command?
How hard is he throwing?
You got velo or command? There's the question.
If it's not 100, I go with command.
All right. Last question. Long hair, short hair, or no hair? For your player, your prospect.
Oh, I'll go with short hair.
All right. That's
I mean,
it.
there, you know, there are plenty of guys that have that flow going on in the back, but that's fine. But I can't get it anymore because I don't have any hair left, so I'll go with short hair.
All right, brother. That's it, man. Thanks, brother.
Thank you.
All right, brother.